AITA for ghosting my girlfriend of 2 years after her dinner confession. The thing about reality is that it doesn't care about your perception of it. You can build a world, brick by brick, over 2 years, a world filled with shared jokes, quiet mornings, and the certain warmth of another person's hand in yours. You can live in that world, breathe its air, and believe in its foundations with every fiber of your being. And then, in one single, casual conversation, you can watch it all crumble into dust, revealing itself to have been nothing more than a meticulously detailed mirage. That's what happened to me last night. I'm still reeling, still picking through the rubble, and I need to know if I'm the one who was wrong for how I finally reacted. It started with Maya. To everyone who knew us, we were a couple. We met at a friend's birthday party 2 years ago, a cliché beginning for a story that turned out to be anything but ordinary. I was leaning against the kitchen counter, trying to look interested in a bowl of chips, and she was arguing good-naturedly with the host about the best way to make a proper cup of chai. She was passionate, her hands flying through the air, her eyes alight with a fervor I usually only saw in political debates. I was captivated. I inserted myself into the conversation, claiming my grandmother's chai recipe was objectively superior. She raised an eyebrow, a challenge sparkling in her gaze, and said, "Prove it." A week later, I was in her small, sun-drenched kitchen, grinding cardamom pods while she boiled the milk. We spent the next 24 months in what I thought was a committed, loving relationship. We had keys to each other's apartments. I knew her coffee order by heart, a flat white with an extra shot, always in a real mug, never to go, and she knew that I took my tea black and bitter, a habit left over from my college days. We spent holidays with each other's families. Her nieces and nephews called me Uncle Mark. I helped her father build a new deck last summer, and he'd clap me on the shoulder and call me son. We talked about the future, not in concrete, let's get married next June terms, but in the soft, hopeful maybes of if we ever get a dog, it should be a rescue. And when we go to Italy, we have to see the Amalfi Coast. I called her my girlfriend. She never corrected me. Not once. She introduced me to people, and I was Mark. The label was implied, I thought. It was woven into the very fabric of our days, in the way she'd curl into my side on the couch, her cold feet tucked under my thighs, in the way she'd text me goodnight if we were apart. A simple sleep well-ex. In the quiet, comfortable intimacy of a Sunday afternoon spent reading in the same room, not speaking for hours, yet feeling completely connected. The cracks, of course, were there in hindsight. I was just too busy living in my beautiful, self-constructed world to see them. She was fiercely independent, which I admired. She never wanted to merge finances, which made perfect sense. We weren't married. She sometimes referred to her life as a singular entity, saying things like, "I need to figure out my 5-year plan," or "My goal is to buy a house by the time I'm 35, without automatically including me, but I chalked that up to her being a modern, self-sufficient woman. She had a demanding career, and I respected her ambition. I never pressed for a more explicit definition of our relationship because, from where I was standing, it was already defined. The evidence was overwhelming. We were a unit. We were partners. Or so I believed with every beat of my foolish heart. The catalyst was a casual dinner at our favorite low-key Italian place, the one with the red checkered tablecloths and the owner, Luigi, who always gave us a free glass of limoncello at the end of the meal. We were sharing a bottle of Chianti, laughing about a stupid meme we'd seen, the kind of easy, comfortable night that had become the bedrock of my life. The conversation drifted to our friend Sarah, who had just gotten engaged in a whirlwind romance that had everyone surprised. "It's amazing how fast it happened for them," I said, swirling the dark red wine in my glass. "Just goes to show, when you know, you know you know." I wasn't hinting at anything, not really. It was just an observation, a statement of fact that felt universally acknowledged. Maya smiled, a soft, distant look in her eyes as she tore a piece of crusty bread. "Yeah, it's sweet. I'm happy for her. I'm just not there yet myself, you know? Still enjoying the single life, figuring myself out." The words hung in the air between us, thick and suffocating. The single life. I remember the sound of the restaurant seemed to dial down, the clatter of plates and the murmur of other conversations fading into a dull hum. The laughter from a table nearby sounded like it was coming from the end of a long tunnel. I must have misheard. My brain simply refused to process the syllables she had just strung together. "Sorry, what did you just say?" I asked, my voice sounding strangely calm, detached, as if it belonged to someone else. She took a sip of wine, completely oblivious to the seismic shift her words had triggered in my universe. "I said I'm happy for Sarah, but I'm not ready for that kind of commitment. I'm still enjoying being single, having my own space, my own life. It's important to have that independence before you settle down, don't you think?" I stared at her. I searched her face for any sign of a joke, a prank, a test, any indication that she was being ironic or trying to provoke a reaction. There was nothing. Just serene, unshakable sincerity. She meant it. Every single word. "Maya," I said slowly, carefully, as if approaching a wild animal that might spook. "We've been together for 2 years. We have keys to each other's places. We spend almost every night together. I just spent Christmas with your family. How are you single?" She looked at me then, a faint line of confusion appearing between her perfectly shaped brows. It was the look you give someone who has just stated that the sky is green or that water is dry. A look of pure, unadulterated bafflement. "What do you mean?" "We're dating, Mark. We're seeing each other. It's great. But that's not the same as being in a committed relationship, is it? We're not. Like, boyfriend and girlfriend." The phrase boyfriend and girlfriend sounded so juvenile coming from her in that moment, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 sledgehammers. My entire body went cold. The brick wall of our reality, the one I had been leaning against for 2 years, had just vanished, and I was tumbling backwards into a void. The foundation of my life had been made of paper, and she had just held a match to it. "We're not," I repeated, a flat, hollow statement. It wasn't a question. "Well, no," she said, her tone now slightly defensive, as if I were being deliberately obtuse. "I mean, we never had that conversation. We never defined it. I just assumed we were on the same page. We're having fun, we're companions. I care about you so much, you know that. But I'm not ready to be anyone's girlfriend. I thought you understood that. You've never pressured me. Companions." The word echoed in the hollow space where my heart used to be. It was a sterile, passionless word. It described people who played bridge together or hiked on weekends. It did not describe two people who had whispered, "I love you," in the dark, whose bodies had learned the map of each other's skin. I thought of the Christmas presents we had carefully chosen for each other, the family dinners where I sat beside her as her mother passed me the mashed potatoes, the nights I held her while she cried about a difficult project at work, my shirt damp with her tears. I thought of the future we had painted with our words, the rescue dog, the trip to Italy, the vague but comforting shape of a shared life ahead. All of it was reframed, recast in an instant. I wasn't her partner. I was her companion, a placeholder, a convenient, consistent source of emotional and physical intimacy without the burden of a label or a future. A situationship that had, through my own blindness and her willing omission, lasted 2 whole years. "You never corrected me," I whispered, my voice cracking under the strain. "I called you my girlfriend 100 times. To my friends, to my family, to the barista at the coffee shop. You never said a word." She shrugged, a small, helpless gesture that felt like a knife twisting deep in my gut. "I didn't want to hurt your feelings. It seemed awkward, and it didn't seem like a big deal. The label isn't important, is it? What we have is real, isn't it? The connection, the time we spend together. That's what matters." And that was the most devastating part of it all. The label wasn't important to me. Not the word itself. The commitment was. The mutual understanding was. The shared vision of a future was. But for her, the label was a cage, a contract, a limitation of her freedom, and the lack of it was a get-out-of-jail-free card she had been holding onto the entire time. Our real thing was, in her eyes, a temporary arrangement. It had an expiration date she was aware of, but had never seen fit to share with me. I couldn't breathe. The air in the restaurant felt thick and suffocating, the smell of garlic and tomatoes suddenly cloying and nauseating. I saw our entire history play back on a new, horrifying reel. Every time she dodged a we statement, every time she talked about her future in solo terms, every time she'd been vaguely complimentary but non-committal when introducing me to new people from her work. This is Mark. We've been hanging out for a while. It all clicked into a perfect, painful picture of willful misunderstanding. I had been living in a shared novel, believing we were co-authors. She had been reading a different book altogether, one where I was a minor, recurring character in the story of her single, independent life. I need to go, I said, standing up so abruptly my chair scraped loudly against the tile floor, a jarring sound that made several people at nearby tables glance over. Mark, don't be dramatic, she said, her voice taking on a sharp, impatient edge. Sit down. Let's talk about this. You're overreacting. Overreacting. I let out a sound that was halfway between a laugh and a sob, a harsh, ugly noise. Maya, I thought I was building a life with you. You thought you were just dating. For 2 years. That's not an overreaction. That's a fundamental disconnect in the very fabric of our, whatever this is. My entire understanding of the last 2 years of my life is a lie. A lie you let me believe. I fumbled in my wallet, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grasp the bills. I threw enough cash onto the table to cover my meal and my half of the wine. I couldn't let her pay for me. Not now. The gesture felt symbolic, pathetic, but utterly necessary. It was the first act of severing the tie, of rejecting the unspoken contract of companionship she had drafted without my knowledge. Where are you going? She asked, her confusion now laced with a clear, rising annoyance, as if I were the one being unreasonable, as if I were ruining a perfectly pleasant evening with my sudden, inconvenient emotional crisis. Away, I said, the words simple and final. I need to be away from you. I turned and walked out of the restaurant. I didn't run, I just walked, one foot in front of the other, my mind a screaming, white-hot static of disbelief and a pain so profound it felt physical. The cool night air did nothing to soothe the burning in my lungs. My phone started buzzing in my pocket, a persistent, angry vibration against my thigh. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again, a digital tether trying to pull me back into the illusion. I finally pulled it out under the sickly yellow glow of a street lamp, saw her name lighting up the screen, a name that had once filled me with a sense of home and now felt like a stranger's, and without a second thought, I pressed the button to block her number. The screen went dark. Then, standing right there on the sidewalk, I opened every social media app one had and blocked her there, too. It wasn't a gesture of anger, not really. It was a triage measure, an act of survival. I needed the constant, comforting, deceptive presence of her in my digital life to be gone, because I had just learned it was never really there to begin with. I was performing a digital amputation to save what was left of my sanity. I drove back to my apartment on autopilot, the familiar streets looking alien and menacing. I walked into the apartment, the one she had a key to, the one that had bits of her scattered everywhere, a hair tie on the bedside table, a specific brand of herbal tea in the cupboard next to my coffee, a soft, gray sweater draped over the back of the reading chair, a half-empty bottle of her favorite conditioner in my shower. Each item was a landmine. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt numb, hollowed out. I found a cardboard box in the closet and started gathering it all. I didn't throw it away in a rage. I methodically, almost robotically, placed each item into the box. It felt like gathering evidence from a crime scene, the scene of the crime against my own perception, my own trust, my own heart. This was the discovery phase, and every hairpin, every book she'd left behind, was Exhibit A in the case of my own monumental foolishness. This is where I might be the one who was wrong. I didn't explain. I didn't engage in a long, drawn-out conversation. I didn't give her a chance to clarify. What was there to clarify? She had been perfectly, horrifyingly clear. She believed we were two single people who enjoyed each other's company. I believed we were in a loving, committed partnership. Both of these things could not be true. They were mutually exclusive realities. So I chose to accept her reality, because mine had just been proven to be a fantasy, a shared delusion I had experienced alone. About an hour later, my doorbell rang, a sharp, insistent sound that cut through the numb silence. I didn't need to look to know who it was. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It was her. She looked upset, her eyes red-rimmed, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Mark, open the door. We need to talk. This is ridiculous." I didn't answer. I stood silently on the other side of the door, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood, closing my eyes. "Mark, I know you're in there. Your car is outside. Please. You can't just walk away from 2 years because of one misunderstanding." Her voice was muffled but clear, tinged with a frustration that felt like a brand new betrayal. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a chasm. It was the Grand Canyon of emotional disconnects. A misunderstanding is about forgetting an anniversary or showing up at the wrong restaurant. This was about the entire fundamental nature of our connection. There was no bridge that could span that gap. She stayed there for what felt like an eternity, knocking, calling my name, her voice shifting from pleading to angry and back again. "Just let me explain. You're being so immature about this. It's just a word, Mark. It's just a stupid word." Eventually, her words faded into frustrated sobs, and then I heard her footsteps retreating down the hall. The silence that followed was even heavier than before. The fallout has been swift. My phone, now devoid of her contact, began to light up with messages from mutual friends. "Hey, Maya is really upset. What happened?" From my friend Chris. "Dude, she said you just ghosted her out of nowhere? After 2 years? That's cold." From her friend and my occasional drinking buddy, Ben. "Is everything okay with you too? Maya is crying and saying you won't talk to her." From Sarah, the newly engaged friend whose happiness had inadvertently been the catalyst for my ruin. I haven't responded in detail. I don't have the energy for a full inquest. I just send back some variation of the same, sterile response. "We had a fundamental disagreement about the nature of our relationship. I need some space." This, of course, makes me look like the cryptic, heartless villain. She's probably telling them I freaked out over nothing, that I was demanding a label she wasn't ready for, framing it as me being needy and controlling while she was just a free spirit who valued her independence. She was the reasonable one, and I was the emotional bomb that had suddenly detonated. And part of me, the part that is still tangled in the ghost of what I thought we had, wonders if that's true. Am I the one who was wrong for walking away so completely? Should I have sat down and had a calm, adult conversation about it, explaining my feelings, my perception, my shattered reality? Should I have tried to understand her perspective, to work through it, to find some middle ground in a chasm that has no bottom? But what is there to work through? She doesn't love me the way I love her. She never did. She saw our time together as a pleasant, temporary arrangement. I saw it as the foundation of my life. To sit and talk about that would be like a plant trying to negotiate with a gardener who has just revealed they never intended to water it, that they just liked the way it looked in the pot for a while. The conversation itself would be a fresh form of torture, forcing me to listen to her explain, in gentle, rationalizing detail, how little I actually meant to her, when her actions over 2 years had already made me believe I meant everything. By walking away, by cutting all contact, I am protecting the last shred of my dignity. I am acknowledging the truth she so casually revealed over a plate of spaghetti. I was never her boyfriend. Therefore, I have no obligation to provide a boyfriend's breakup, with its painful discussions and manufactured closure and shared grief. You don't grieve the end of something that never truly existed. You grieve the time you wasted believing in it. You grieve the person you were when you were living inside the lie. So I put it to you. Am I the one who was wrong for walking away after realizing I was never her boyfriend at all? For refusing to engage in a post-mortem of a relationship that, in her eyes, was never a relationship to begin with? For choosing to save myself the further pain of listening to her explain, in detail, the precise dimensions of the box she had kept me in for 2 years? The silence I'm giving her now is brutal, I know that. It is the silence of a grave, and I am burying the man I was when I was with her. But it's the only honest response I have left. The man who loved her, the man who thought he was her partner, he doesn't exist anymore. He vanished in that restaurant booth, replaced by a stranger staring at a woman he suddenly realized he had never known at all. And that man, the one left standing in the ruins, doesn't owe anyone an explanation. The story ends here, but our journey doesn't have to. If you want to join me for the next tale, please subscribe and ring that bell. Your support means everything. Thanks for watching.